Hey everyone, thanks for listening in. I'm Lillian Freiberg. I lead North America for Clarity AI, and I am back again with Austin Ritzel, Clarity's head of special projects and AI strategy. Today, we are going to be getting into how AI and energy became the same story, why it's a bipartisan fight, what China's doing differently, and where the money's going. So it's structured as 6 questions. We'll see how many we get through. 4 different conversations, basically. Awesome. As always, it's good to have you.
Thanks, Lillian. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get right into it. What's actually changed, right? 6 months ago, AI and energy transition were basically 2 separate stories. Energy was a climate story, AI was a tech story. Why did they suddenly become the same conversation?
Because they now share the same bottleneck. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, which many in the audience will be familiar with our leather jacket clad narrator, he describes AI as a 5-layer cake, and the first layer, the one that really sets the ceiling, is energy. AI is at its most fundamental level the conversion of electrons into tokens into intelligence. So underneath all the shiny models and chips that we love talking about, the AI race is fundamentally an electricity race. And that's what we call the physical governor. Our adoption is bound grid capacity and semiconductors. So a few years ago, the energy transition was fundamentally a climate story. Now it is still, yes, very much still a climate story, but also an exigent industrial capacity story. And if we think about energy in the aggregate as it relates to AI's energy usage represents a few percentage points today of the US's total electricity demand, but that figure, as I think we all know, is growing very, very fast. Studies suggest that data centers will account for somewhere around 12% of total electricity demand by 2030. That might not sound like a lot, but now you have to consider the fact that US electricity has grown by less than 0.4%, 0.4% over the last 10 years on an annual basis. So now we're looking at implied rates of growth that are an order of magnitude higher than that. And there are massive challenges associated with building out capacity at that clip. And for the payer, because I think focusing on the ratepayer is a very, very important part of discourse today, if the data center is connected to the grid, supply and demand dictates that American ratepayers will indirectly pay for that usage. And that can result in some really eye-watering energy bill increases, particularly in areas with high data center density, like Data Center Alley in Virginia, where electricity prices have jumped more than 200%.
And it's not just aggregate, right? This is hitting actual electrical bills in places, like you said, like Virginia, which is why it's a kitchen table issue now, not a climate one.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if that leads directly into my next question, what does that say that this administration and Bernie Sanders are worried about the exact same thing?
I think it reflects the fact that the backlash is genuinely bipartisan. So just 28% of US voters view AI in a favorable light. And that's less favorable than almost any political institution that you can name. And as James Carville famously said, it's the economy, stupid. Whether we're talking about energy bills or employment anxiety, responding to constituent economic concerns about AI just makes policy sense for politicians, irrespective of their political or ideological leanings. There is also a uniting national security and sovereignty concern. So AI has huge geopolitical implications. The components of its physical substrate are cast about all over the world. You have the Netherlands for lithography, you have Taiwan for semiconductors, China for rare earth, and the US for GPU design, and many more. Pretty much everyone can agree on the need to supply that, or to secure, that supply chain.
Yeah, I think it's really rare to see the build faster and the slow down camps both this loud at once, which makes China's quieter approach even more interesting. I was able to catch Aniket Shah speaking at USIF in DC a few weeks ago. It seems like this is the next big issue to rock the space. So focusing on that, I mean, we can call this the tale of 2 countries. The US has, on the one hand, this very public, diplomatically put, we can call it tension, right? What's China actually doing differently from the West?
So in many ways, China is running the mirror image of the US strategy. On the physical substrate side, the US has the leading chips, but struggles to add electricity. China struggles for chips, but is winning the energy race. The nation is very well heeled, meaning China is very well heeled in rapid energy expansion as a consequence of the exponential growth in consumer demand that has arisen as a result of the country's development. So it has the muscle really needed for this build out. On the model side, this is very much an oversimplification, but China is focused on architectural and engineering efficiency as opposed to pushing the absolute frontier of intelligence. The latter has historically been the US's primary focus. Chinese labs have also received a lot of subsidies, and they price intelligence at near marginal cost in order to drive adoption and broad diffusion. The ultimate outcome of those factors is that these open weight Chinese models are much cheaper than closed weight US frontier models. So the status quo has been historically that the US models enjoy at least a 12-month capability lead over their Chinese counterparts, but come at a much higher price. All of that said, many in the audience will be aware of the recent release of Moonshot's Kimi K3 model. There's still a lot to digest about Kimi in the real world, but it demonstrates that even that gap between US frontier capabilities and Chinese capabilities is shrinking.
So loud fight here, and by here I mean the US where I am. I know you're in Madrid, but quiet strategy in China. And I think that split really shows up in the markets too.
And that's
yeah,
really
no,
your world, right, Lillian? So I think it's interesting for the audience to understand, where is capital actually placing its bets in a fight like this?
I mean, here's what surprised me. I think all through 2025, Washington's in this really loud fight, and clean energy stocks still had one of their best years ever, right? That's pretty shocking. And then the S&P Global Clean Energy Index was up nearly 50%. For context, the broader market under 20%. Think of that comparison. So it's not really a Washington getting friendlier story. It's the AI power demand and the capital chasing it. And so if you think of, for example, Bloom Energy, which is up more than 300% this year on its Oracle deal, and Brookfield's fuel cell financing with Bloom just grew to a full 25 billion. So the electrons are really getting too valuable to ignore. I mean, is it durable? I think that's where things are really genuinely contested. Remember the DeepSeek moment, right? When a cheap model gets released and then these tanks stock overnight. So I think there's a real rally, there's a real thesis. It's just a lot more fragile than it looks.
The natural follow-up question, Lillian, is what does that mean for the people actually making decisions in this ecosystem?
Well, from what I'm seeing from the clarity vantage point, right? I think in the market that's this contested, generic claims don't mean much anymore, right? I think what matters is getting into more granular, more current data, emphasis on current data, right? So that means by facility, that means by contract level, by jurisdiction. So not a once a year average like it used to be. And that takes real infrastructure built into how someone's actually deciding, right? So just not a static report. We have moved so far beyond that. It's just not going to cut it anymore. So it's not about the label that you're wearing. It's whether you can sort of produce the data that you trust fast enough to act on. And I think that's the real game changer.
And I think it's probably a tighter needle to thread than most firms would prefer to admit. I think it'll stick with me, this idea that the electrons have gotten too valuable to ignore. I think that many in our ecosystem would do well to remember that phrase.
Oh, I'm honored that I'm the one with the plucked sentence for today. But Austin, thanks for making this make sense as usual. If anything has sparked a question to anyone watching, reach out. We would love to keep the conversation going. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lillian.
Bye.